You don't notice a civilization ending. Not at first. It doesn't start with sirens or explosions. It begins with silence. A creeping, calculated silence. The kind that slips into gaps of your life like a spider building its web. One day, your neighbor doesn't answer the door. A week later, the coffee shop that always smelled like burnt beans and hope is shuttered with no sign. Then your brother, always online, always sarcastic, just stops messaging. You brush it off. Everyone does. We were always good at ignoring signs. We had Netflix queues to finish, jobs to hate, and memes to repost. We thought we were invincible, too loud, too stubborn to disappear. But I remember the moment I realized it wasn't just me losing people. It was all of us. I was standing in a subway car under New York City, the usual screech of steel on steel above our heads. Packed, humid, except there were too many empty seats. A Tuesday at 8:15 a.m., and I looked around and realized I didn't recognize anyone, which is insane because we're creatures of routine. Same faces, same clothes, same miserable coffee cups. But all of them, gone, replaced. Then one of the replacements looked at me, too long, too still, and blinked sideways. We called it the silent sweep. Not that anyone officially called it anything. There were no announcements, no breaking news, no declarations from the UN, just a growing emptiness. People vanished, replaced by them. They weren't loud. No ray guns, no marching robots, just subtle surgical occupation. By the time the governments noticed, they were already riddled with infiltrators. Presidents shook hands with monsters in human skin. Generals gave orders to things that had never fought a war, but knew how to end one. Quietly, we weren't prepared. How could we be? Our satellites saw nothing. Our sensors picked up no ships, no wormholes, no warning. The invaders didn't arrive. They'd always been here. Hidden, waiting. They wore our faces, spoke in our tongues, married into our families. And then, when the networks flickered and died, they called us, not in swarms. One at a time. One heartbeat here, one breath there. Cities emptied in weeks. No rubble, no bodies, just absences. We've been screaming into a void that never answered back. And when it finally did, it whispered, "Humanity is obsolete." My name's Theo Granger, ex-civil engineer, failed husband, and reluctant survivor. I'm one of the last voices you'll hear, if you're still listening, because someone has to tell you, we are not extinct. Not yet. I live in the echo zone now, an abandoned transit tunnel beneath Brooklyn that was too deep for them to sweep properly. It's damp, cold, and smells like old oil and regrets. But it's ours. We scavenge food, hack old power lines, keep moving, keep hiding. And every night, we gather by the fire and swap names of the fallen. Like a prayer we refuse to stop repeating. There are others, survivors, fighters, wakers, those who woke up too late, but chose to stand instead of vanish. We're not organized yet. Not really. No armies. No grand resistance, just pockets of pain refusing to die. But we've started carving something into the walls of our shelters, of abandoned libraries and broken police stations. 3 words. We are loud, because that's what terrifies them. Not our guns, not our tech, our defiance. I once found a child, maybe 8 years old, hiding in a garbage chute. Her name was Anna. Her family was replaced, one by one, right in front of her. She didn't cry when she told me, just stared straight through me and whispered. They like quiet things. That night, I gave her a whistle, told her to blow it if she ever felt them nearby. She blew an hour later. We burned that block. Loudly. They heard us. We wanted them to. This story isn't about how we lost. It's about how we refused to vanish. They tried to end us in silence, in shadows. But they forgot what humans become when cornered, when grieving, when alone but not broken. We don't go quietly. We scream. And now we're starting to roar. We learned early on that the cities were traps. Not all of them, just the big ones. The ones with dense networks, surveillance systems, transit grids. Places where people vanished by the thousands without so much as a bloodstain. New York, Tokyo, Paris, Lagos, all became sterile husks filled with ghosts wearing human skin. We called them the Hollowed, the occupied cities that still buzz with power, still flicker with digital noise, but where no real humans walk the streets, where the lights were always a little too perfect, the air too still, the eyes on you never blinking quite right. But we had to go back in. We needed something. Our group, small, loud, and desperate, was after an old server cache buried under the United Nations complex in Geneva, a last-ditch archive from the days when the governments realized what was happening and tried to hide data, proof, plans. They failed, but the server remained. The mission fell 5 of us. Myself, Reyes, Mira, old man Cowrie, and a quiet kid named Jules who carried a radio like it was his beating heart. Geneva was the worst of them. The Hollow didn't just walk there, they watched. From windows, from behind unmoving buses, from glass buildings where lights never turned off. They didn't blink unless you blinked first. They mimicked traffic sounds, bird calls, even the distant wail of sirens. But not one real life, not one child's laugh, not one smell of cooking food, just the sound of maintenance. We moved underground, through forgotten metro tunnels and flooded sewers. Mira led, former Swiss rail technician turned insurgent. She moved like a shadow that had decided to fight back. 3 levels below the city, we breached a long-forgotten cable vault that led directly under the UN complex. "I hate this place," Reyes muttered, adjusting the pulse jammer on his shoulder. "Even the concrete feels watched." Cowrie snorted. "Concrete's got more soul than half the politicians that used to work here." We made it to the server room, untouched, cold, clean, and buzzing. Still active. Jules jacked in, fingers dancing like he was born to resurrect ghosts. I kept watch at the door, watching for things that didn't breathe. He pulled something from the drive, a black box archive of communications between global intelligence agencies, recorded just before the final sweeps. Whispers of betrayal. Entire governments that capitulated in secret. They knew the invasion wasn't conventional. They knew who the Hollowed were, and they let it happen in exchange for survival. They traded us. I said aloud, scrolling through the decrypted logs. They thought if they let a portion of humanity be culled, the rest would be absorbed peacefully. Cowrie spat on the floor. Always the old men with pens deciding who dies first. But then Jules found something else. A ping. A transmission beacon buried in the archive code. Active. It wasn't one of theirs. It was human. Weak. Encoded in a format no AI could emulate. Morse. It read, "Humanity alive. Military Deep Core Station Theta. South Pacific Trench. We fell but we rise. We rise." We all froze. A surviving command post. A real one. Not just scavengers or echo zones, but a military redoubt deep in the ocean where the Hollowed couldn't reach. A place where we could fight back with something more than Molotovs and radio static. "We have to reach them," Mira whispered. "Pacific's a long way from here," Reyes said. I looked back at the cold server racks. "Then we better start walking." We packed what we could, copied the data, burned the room, left Geneva behind in flames and warnings. The Hollowed responded instantly, swarms of them pouring into the tunnels behind us. But we were already gone. 2 days later, we lost Cowrie on a bridge in Lyon. He smiled as he lit the detonator, giving us time to escape. He died laughing, not quietly. We're moving now, fast and hard, dodging cities and following river south. Scatter human enclaves send coded replies to the Morse ping. A resistance network is forming louder every day. A signal passed through whispers, bullet scars, and hacked frequencies. They try to end U.S. quietly. We do not die quietly. And now we know the truth. They didn't just invade Earth. They infected it. The Hollowed weren't aliens in the traditional sense. They were a biotech corruption, a viral consciousness that imitated intelligence, built from stolen neural patterns and synthetic DNA. Designed not to dominate, but to replace. They weren't here for conquest. They were here for silence. But humanity? We are a species of noise, of music, laughter, screams, and war drums. We thrive in chaos. We are born of friction. Every time they erase us, we echo louder. This isn't a war for land. This is a war for memory, for the soul of what it means to be human. We don't care how deep they hide, how long they've watched us, or how perfect their mimicry becomes. We see them now, and we're coming for them, one burned city at a time. The journey south wasn't a march. It was a bleeding trail of near death and close calls, stitched together by hope and vengeance. By the time we crossed into the remnants of what used to be Spain, we'd lost Reyes to a hollowed ambush, and Mira had taken shrapnel to the ribs. She still limped, but she never complained. We weren't running anymore. We were hunting. The transmissions from the South Pacific military redoubt, Theta, grew stronger as we got closer to uncorrupted relay zones. The ping was regular now, each message ending with a coded phrase. Memories resist extinction. Jules said it was an old Black Ops slogan, buried in Cold War archives. They're trying to remind us who we are, he told me. Because the Hollowed? They don't just erase people. They erase the past. We stopped in the ruins of Valencia. What was left of it? The sky was the color of scorched steel, and the buildings leaned like they were ashamed to still be standing. But it wasn't empty. At the edge of the coastal district, we found something stranger than hollowed. We found children, not hollowed mimics, not corrupted drones. Actual children, dozens of them, living in a twisted sprawl of scavenged tech and broken furniture, protected by humming field emitters made from repurposed fusion cores. They called themselves the Children of Static, and they remembered everything. Their leader, barely 15, called herself Lynx, hair like a thundercloud, skin scarred with circuitry tattoos. Her voice was harder than steel, and her eyes flicked with the cold focus of someone who watched too many adults vanish. "We don't trust anyone over 20, she said, leveling a plasma slingshot at my chest when we first met. "I'm 35, I said, "but I brought chocolate." It bought us 5 minutes. Turns out, the Children of Static were the descendants of rogue engineers and fringe scientists who'd seen the Hollowed coming long before the governments did. They trained their kids to live without centralized systems, to speak in dead languages, to filter digital signals through analog distortions the Hollowed couldn't mimic. That's where the name came from, Static. The Hollowed couldn't replicate imperfection. They didn't understand randomness, noise, or glitches. These children, they weaponized it. Old AM radios crackled warnings across rooftops. Broken TVs played looping tapes of lost cities. Cassette recorders ran constant background fuzz through speakers around the compound. "We keep the static alive," Lynx said, walking me past a wall of shattered hard drives arranged like a shrine. "Because in the static, we remember the truth, the real voices, not the hollowed lies." We spent a week with them, healing, resting, learning. Lynx showed Jules how to encrypt the theta signal into layered analog bursts, making it nearly impossible to trace. Mira taught the older kids how to rig kinetic traps and disarm hollowed mimics. And I told stories, real ones, of cities that refused to die, of Cowrie's laugh on that bridge, of Rhea's last words as he lit the charge that took half a mimic nest with him. They listened, not like children, like soldiers. One night, Lynx took me to the rooftop. The Mediterranean was black glass, broken only by the twinkle of fallen satellites overhead. She said, "They took my mother's voice. I still remember the sound of it, but when I try to speak it out loud, it slips like it was never real." "They can't take it if you share it," I told her. "Say out loud, then teach someone else. That's how we beat them." She looked at me, and for the first time, I saw the flicker of a child behind the warrior. Then she said her mother's name, Ava, and it stayed. The next morning, the Hollowed came. They'd tracked a broken drone we'd disabled 2 days prior. A full mimic unit breached the outer wall with surgical precision. No sound, no shouting. Just a low harmonic hum that made the fillings in your teeth ache. The children were ready. They screamed, literally. Custom feedback loops, sonic traps, infrared strobes. One girl activated a rigged speaker tower that blasted distorted punk rock encoded with jamming frequencies. The Hollowed buckled, twitched, folded in on themselves like broken mannequins. Mira limped into battle with a sawed-off plasma welder and tore through their flank. Jules broadcast a decoy signal that led half the mimics into a dead-end corridor rigged with liquid thermite. By dawn, we held the ruins. Barely. 2 of the older boys died. A dozen others were injured, but the static held. They didn't run. They roared. After the smoke cleared, Lynx handed me a thumb drive wrapped in tape. Old world intel, she said. Schematics, submarine launch codes, locations of black site hangars that never went public. You're giving this to us? She nodded. Because it's your job to get to Theta. But when this war's over, I smiled. You'll run the world, won't you? No, she said. We'll rebuild it louder. We left Valencia that night with more than supplies. We left with a signal booster, new weapons, encrypted coordinates, and something deeper. Proof that the next generation wasn't afraid. That memory was louder than extinction. The Hollowed were evolving, adapting, becoming harder to spot, harder to predict. But we were evolving, too. We had new voices now. You want to kill humanity? Then you better silence every last scream. Because we don't fade. We amplify. The Hollowed didn't chase us across the Pyrenees. They waited for us. The roads were empty, too empty. No scavengers. No wildlife. Just rows of cars long abandoned, their doors still open like their owners had just stepped out for coffee and never came back. Jules called it a cold zone. No signals. No interference. Not even static. It wasn't silence. It was extraction. A memory vacuum. We passed through towns where every screen flickered with a perfect blue. No sound. No commands. Just that sterile glow. It made your skin crawl. Made you forget what you were saying mid-sentence. We lost Mira for a full hour. She wandered off, blank-eyed, lips moving like she was trying to finish a thought that never began. We pulled her back. Barely. She didn't speak for the rest of the day. We reached what was once an experimental facility buried under the French mountains, code-named Severance, according to the drive Lynx had given us. It was a human-run data sanctum designed to preserve untainted memory, a digital seed vault for consciousness. Not AI, not backups, conscious imprints. Echoes of minds recorded in quantum lattices. Last resort copies of human thought. Jules was excited. If we can access them, we can recover lost intel. Strategies. Plans we never got to use. I wasn't excited. I was cautious. The deeper we went, the colder it got, not temperature-wise, emotionally, like the walls themselves were trying to forget what had happened inside. Severance was intact. Power was running. And inside, the dead spoke. The core chamber was a cathedral of cables and memory nodes, each one holding someone who no longer breathed, but hadn't been allowed to die. We activated one node. A woman's voice filled the air. This is Dr. Eliza Rourke. If you're hearing this, I am dead, but I am not gone. Welcome to the archive. God help us all. She spoke for 5 hours straight. Tactical briefings. Biological data on the hollowed synthetic DNA. Failures of containment. Last-minute theories. And most chillingly, the origin. They hadn't come from space. They were summoned. Project Vox Initia. An experimental communication array built to listen beyond known dimensions. To catch the echoes of alien civilizations. Only, the signals that came back weren't messages. They were instructions, code, patterns, blueprints for a perfect intelligence, encoded in deep math. At first, the project scientists thought it was a gift, an evolutionary leap. They were wrong. It was bait. When they built it, when they powered it on, it infected them. Not through biology, through thought, and the infection spread. I stare at the flickering holograms of Dr. Rourke's face, pausing every few minutes as a recorded consciousness stuttered in and out of coherence. She hadn't just preserved her knowledge. She had trapped herself, knowingly, inside this prison of ones and zeros. Because someone had to warn us. Mira finally spoke again as she listened to Rourke's final recording. She chose memory over peace. That's what it means to be human. I nodded. We die, but our truths don't. We pulled everything we could from Severance. Maps of old resistance bunkers, frequency charts, hollowed hive dynamics. Jules downloaded the raw consciousness code. Unstable, volatile, illegal even in the best days of Earth. And then we shut Severance down. No backdoors for the hollowed. The dead had done their part. It was time for the living to scream louder. As we emerged from the mountain tunnels, we intercepted a signal, heavily scrambled, faint, but unmistakably human. A repeating distress pulse. From the Atlantic. It was from an old oil rig converted into a civilian sanctuary. A name we hadn't heard in months. Refuge 9. Under siege. Requesting assistance. Please. Anyone. Mira looked at me. It's off course. We were supposed to keep heading south. I stared at the horizon. They're still alive, and they're not going to stay that way unless we help. Jules hesitated. We lose time. We lose the chance to reach Theta. We lose something worse. I said, if we start choosing survival over saving others, we've already become them. That night, as we made our way toward the coast, the stars above flickered, not with beauty, but with surveillance. Satellites the Hollowed had hijacked now drifted in false constellations, blinking coded signals down at their puppets on Earth. We had to move in darkness, speak in code, trust only our eyes and our instincts, because the Hollowed were getting smarter. They were starting to mimic emotion. We saw them cry once. Saw one kneel over the body of a fallen mimic and weep. They knew we were watching. They wanted us to hesitate. But we don't hesitate anymore. We move faster. We hit harder. We scream louder. Because the moment we go quiet, the moment we forget, we die. And humanity does not die quietly. Not now. Not ever. You could smell the smoke before you saw the rig. It rose in thick, oily clouds from the Atlantic, blotting out the sunrise as we approached in a stolen military skiff. Refuge 9, a rusted converted deep-sea oil platform turned sanctuary, looked like a broken crown jutting out of the ocean. Wind turbines bent like snap bones. Half the western scaffolding was gone, charred and skeletal, but it was still standing, still alive. We docked under cover of storm clouds and silence. Jules killed the engine. Mira scanned the upper decks with an old-range LiDAR sweep. Movement, she whispered. 2 floors up. Not hollowed. How do you know? They're arguing. Refuge 9 was chaos wrapped in steel. Dozens of survivors crammed into repurposed storage containers, makeshift bunks, rusted walkways. Children ran barefoot across rain-slick grates. Old soldiers sat with rifles on their knees, eyes sunken and wide. They didn't cheer when they saw us. They looked at us like they'd seen ghosts. Their leader was a man named Dallin Vire, a former logistics officer for the EU Pacific Fleet, turned reluctant commander of a floating graveyard. One eye milky from a hollow plasma burn, the other sharp and untrusting. You shouldn't have come, he said, voice like salt and gravel. They're coming back. They always do. Then let them, I replied. We brought friends. Mira dropped the satchel on the table with a heavy clank. Amplified signal flares, sonic mines, jury rig jammers. The kind of tech that screams you try to erase us. Now we're writing ourselves back in. Refuge 9 had held out longer than most because it floated. The Hollowed hate the ocean. Something about the pressure, the interference, the unpredictability of salt water made them inefficient. But they were adapting, using long-range drones. Boarding parties made from drowned mimic corpse hybrids, designed for wet environments. The last attack had come just 2 days before we arrived. They'd taken 20 people. No bodies left behind, just shadows on the walls. Dallin led me to the radio tower, high above the platform's skeletal spine. There, hung on the interior wall, was a mural, names etched into rusted steel with whatever could scratch. Knives, nails, broken forks. Row after row. He pointed at it. Every one of them was here last month. I looked. Some names had been crossed out and replaced with static loss. Remember U.S. loud. We set to work immediately. Mira and Jules reinforced the outer perimeter while I spoke with the remaining engineers, young, scared, but determined. They still had faith in something, not salvation. Resistance. Why do they keep coming back? One girl asked me. Because we keep saying no, I said, and they don't know what to do with a no. That night we saw the lights. Out on the horizon, a ring of pale blue beacons. One by one, they flickered to life, precise, deliberate, silent. They're triangulating the rig, Jules muttered, preparing a coordinated hit. How long? 4 hours. Maybe less. We didn't run. We broadcast a message instead. Myra's voice across old naval frequencies. To any resistance cells within range. This is Refuge 9. Coordinates encrypted. We are under siege. If you hear this, if you remember who you are, if you refuse to vanish, then come. Come loudly. 2 hours later, they hit us. Drones came first, in eerie formations that moved like synchronized dancers. Then came the climbers, slick black humanoids with too many joints, scaling the platform like spiders with hollow faces. They didn't roar. They hummed. We answered with screams. Explosions tore through the deck. Children in repurposed life, vests dragged ammo crates across the rain-soaked gangways. One elderly woman, who used to teach violin, set off a speaker tower that blasted distorted cello chords designed to fry hollowed neural feedback loops. The rig became a symphony of resistance. Every scream a defiance. Every bullet a memory, refusing to fade. I fought on the upper deck with a rusted machete and a stolen railgun. At one point, I saw Dallin go down, his side ripped open by mimic claws. He still got back up, still fired, still shouted orders. And just when we were about to be overwhelmed, they came. Old tugboats bristling with homemade rocket launchers. Fishing vessels converted into mobile jammer stations. Paragliders dropping payloads of EMP grenades onto hollowed nodes. The resistance answered. Cells from the Azores, Lisbon, North Africa. Even remnants of static enclaves we thought lost. They came with patched radios, weapons wrapped in tape, flags made from old bandanas. They came because we were loud. By dawn, the hollowed were gone. No bodies. Just oily residue on the decks and pieces of tech that sparked and hissed before self-destructing. Dallin survived. So did most of his people. For now, we knew we couldn't stay. Theta still called to us. But before we left, I climbed the massive Refuge 9 and added one more name to the wall. Humanity. No dates. No rank. No last words. Because we weren't done yet. And no one was going to forget us again. We departed into open waters that afternoon. Engine purring. Radio crackling. The ocean vast and unknown before us. Jules stared at the horizon. What happens when we reach Theta? I smiled. We make sure the Hollowed remember why they should have killed us all when they had the chance. Because this isn't just survival. This is the retaking of Earth. One voice at a time. One scream at a time. And if they wanted quiet, they picked the wrong species. We reached Theta beneath a storm. Not above it. Beneath. The entrance lay 3,000 meters below sea level, hidden in a subduction trench near the Mariana Echo Fault. There was no visible structure. No blinking lights. Just a dead beacon embedded in the ocean floor, right where the last transmission had told us to look. It was Mira who spotted the anomaly, an artificial tremor in the seabed, like a heartbeat in stone. Jules ran the math, then activated the frequency Dr. Rourke had left in the Severance archive. That's when the ocean split. A seismic gate peeled back from the seafloor, like the Earth had been holding its breath, and we descended. Theta Base wasn't built. It was grown. A biomechanical hybrid installation designed before the collapse by rogue engineers and deep-code AI loyalists. Humans and machines that hadn't been infected by the Hollowed virus. They used fungal alloys and carbon muscle fibers to construct a living facility, sustained by geothermal vents and immune to synthetic interference. When we docked, the walls flexed like lungs. Lights pulsed in rhythm with our footsteps. I'll be honest, we didn't feel like survivors anymore. We felt like intruders. The first voice that greeted us was human. Sort of, welcome to Theta. State your resistance cell and intent. It was emotionless, flat, but not synthetic. More like, Someone speaking through layers of exhaustion and automation. I stepped forward. Theo Granger. Echo Zone 9. We came for answers. And to fight. A pause. Then, access granted. Prepare for integration. Integration didn't mean assimilation. It meant update. They scanned our memories, selectively, not like the hollowed, who copied and erased. Theta read emotions, intent, data. It filtered trauma through digital empathy engines and fed that back into the neural net coordinating the base's defenses. You feel it too? Jules whispered. I nodded. The base is alive. And it was listening. We were led through corridors of bioluminescent resin and humming floors, past armories of sound-based weapons, data cores filled with lost battle logs, and echo chambers that stored the voices of dead resistance leaders. We were not the first to arrive. Over 600 people had made it here. Engineers, soldiers, thinkers, poets, defectors from early hollowed nests, each one loud in their own way. They called themselves the Echo Front, and they were preparing to retake Earth. We met Commander Vey. Half her body was replaced with adaptive tech grown from Theta's biotech systems. Her left arm had 6 fingers, and her eyes flickered with code when she blinked. I've read your team's memory streams, she said, looking me over. You've lit sparks from Geneva to the Atlantic. We didn't mean to lead them here. I said cautiously. You didn't. She tapped a wall node. It pulsed an answer. Theta was never hidden. It was waiting. She showed us the war map, a holographic lattice of Earth, pulsing red and blue and gray. Each red blotch was a hollowed zone. Blue were confirmed human resistance enclaves. Gray? Gray meant unknown. Entire regions had gone silent. Some may have fallen. Some might still fight. Some might have become something else entirely. The hollowed had begun a new phase, Vey explained. They've stopped replacing us. They're rewriting us, Jules murmured. A mimetic overwrite. Exactly, she said. They've started broadcasting false memories, mass psychic illusions. They want to make us forget we were ever loud. But Theta had a weapon, not a bomb, not a fleet, a signal, a global resonance wave, encoded with emotional spikes, historical memory, resistance voices, screams, laughs, cries. It could ripple through every neural node the hollowed infected and disrupt their mimic programming. They called it the roar. It won't win the war, Vey said, but it will wake the sleeping. Every human mind they muted, every scream they buried, will bring it all back in one massive pulse. I felt goosebumps crawl up my arms. You want to turn the entire planet into a speaker. Yes, she smiled grimly. We're going to remind the galaxy that humans don't die quietly. There was just one problem. The roar required amplification towers. Old orbital arrays now controlled by hollowed satellites. Someone would have to go up there, reactivate the grid, link it to Theta. It was a suicide mission, and I volunteered, because this was what we were born for, not survival. Echo. That night, I stood on Theta's observation platform, staring into abyssal darkness. Mira joined me, shoulder wrapped in biogel, face unreadable. Why you? She asked. Because they tried to erase me once, I said, but I came back louder. She looked out toward the deep water, where the hollow would surely come. They won't let this happen. You know that. I nodded. Then we make them listen anyway. When I climbed into the orbital launch capsule the next morning, every speaker in Theta Base came online. Jules' voice came over the comms, choking with emotion. To all resistance networks, this is Theo Granger, launching on behalf of humanity. Theta is active. The roar is primed. They tried to end us quietly. I smiled, but we remember how to scream. The capsule rose like a whisper against the dark. No grand launch. No thunderous fire. Just a breath of propulsion in the vacuum, designed to avoid hollowed sensors. Low profile. Silent ascent. Irony wasn't lost on me. We were carrying the loudest sound ever made, hidden inside the quietest launch in human history. Below me, the earth curved in blue and green shadows, broken by red scars where cities have fallen. I could see it all. Our failures, our defiance, our fragments clinging to life. Somewhere down there, Mira watched from Theta. Jules tuned frequencies. The children of static prepared their speakers. And above, the hollowed waited. As I reached the upper thermosphere, I saw them. Satellites, dozens, hovering in coordinated formation like artificial constellations. Hollowed orbital drones. Their chassis pulsed with synthetic biolight. Threads of neural data stretched between them like a web. They formed a global silence net, muffling rebellion, filtering screams, distorting truth. And right in the middle, dormant for decades, was Array 9X, an old-world broadcast station, our only hope of awakening Earth. I didn't hesitate. I burned straight toward it. They intercepted me. 3 drones peeled from formation and slammed into my shielding. Screeching in ultrasonics I could feel in my skull. My capsule shuddered, alert screaming, hull fracturing. I gritted my teeth, overriding protocols. Manual override, lock trajectory, launch tether. The capsule screamed back. I hit Array 9X like a bullet. Emergency clamps sealed. I crawled out into 0G, tethered to the old metal skeleton of the array. Every movement was agony. The last drone strike had shattered my right arm, and I was losing oxygen to a cracked valve. But I didn't stop. I reached the control core, breath ragged, vision blurring. The interface was dead. Hollow code had gutted it, replaced it with looping mimic subroutines. Lines of false human memories played on screen. Someone else's childhood. Someone else's laughter. I smashed the panel and inserted the roar key. It didn't activate right away. Instead, the entire array went still. Then it asked me something. Are you certain you want to remember? A whisper in my mind, not mechanical. Human, the voice of every soul the Hollowed had ever silenced. A test, one final choice. I answered the only way I knew how. I screamed, I remember everything. The roar ignited. It wasn't sound. It was emotion, broadcast as pure signal. Joy, pain, grief, defiance, rage, the entire spectrum of human existence, compressed into a pulse wave and unleashed across every surviving speaker, every analog radio, every cracked screen. The Hollowed screamed back, not in pain, in fear. They never truly understood what we were. We weren't built to comply. We were built to resist. Across the planet, humans woke up, mimic programming shattered, infiltrated minds rebooted, cells dormant for years reactivated. Grandparents remembered songs they'd been forced to forget. Children screamed names they'd never been taught. In the Children of Static's compound, Link stood on a rooftop, laughing as her speakers burst with distortion. In Refuge 9, Dallin pulled a rifle from the wall and barked, "It's time." In Geneva, ghosts of resistance long dead flickered to life in rogue AI cores, joining the fight. But they didn't just hear us on Earth. The signal was strong. Too strong. It bounced. Off old satellites, deep space telescopes, derelict lunar probes. It went interstellar. A species that tried to silence us had accidentally amplified us. We weren't just awake. We were announcing ourselves to the stars. My capsule was falling now. Atmosphere roaring around me. Fire dancing across the viewport. I knew I wouldn't survive re-entry. Didn't matter. This wasn't about survival anymore. It was about echo. And I knew, as my body burned and Earth rose up to meet me, that somewhere someone would remember my name. Not because I was a soldier, but because I never went quiet. You asked what happened next. We retook our cities. We tore down their towers. We hunted the last of them in forests, in oceans, in space. It wasn't clean. It wasn't fast. But it was ours. A reclamation in static and song and scream. Now, when children ask about the war, we don't show them maps or weapons. We show them recordings of our voices, because they try to end us quietly. But humanity doesn't die quietly. We make sure of that.